If I told you, Shray, you will get 50,000 rupees a year from now for the next 30 years. You're 60 today. You're going to get 50,000 rupees a month every month for the next 30 years. Or take 1 crore right now and forget me, I'm not going to pay you anything per month. Then which option would you take?
Deepak, enough about high-level stuff. Let's get down to brass tacks. I am a fortunate or unfortunate private sector employee who has to figure this out on my own. So how much do I need to invest? What do I invest in? And when I have to take money out, where do I take it from?
The problem isn't mathematical, it's behavioral. The first thing is, when you start talking to government employees and you start looking at people that are around them, everybody wants something that says, oh, I get paid so much as a pension from the government. It is a matter of pride.
Just think of an example, right? The person was 30 when they started planning. They're planning to retire at 60, and then I guess they're planning to live for another 30 years. So even when they retire, they still have 30 more years to go. So 100% it probably never makes sense.
But I'm positive that even equity markets, like life, will find a way. And therefore, I think betting on the ingenuity of human is probably still a good thing.
Deepak, pensions are clearly a very big deal. I was reading this great coverage about the debate versus NPS and UPS, the I think National or New Pension Scheme and the new, more recent Unified Pension Scheme, in an Economic Times article yesterday. It was comparing the two for you. And this really got me thinking. Pensions seem like such a sticking point for so many people and government employees. It's such a life-altering decision for them. But the question that comes to mind to me, first up, and I really want to dive into this, is there's really two problems. If you're a government employee, I guess you have pension as an option for you, and we'll go down that path and talk about it now. And if you're a private sector person, maybe these options aren't as lucrative, and you have to figure out things yourself. So I really want to focus on what a private sector person can do. But maybe I'll start with the whole concept of a pension and the grip it has on, say, public sector employees. What makes this pension so attractive? And the reason I ask that is, I get that it's a guaranteed payout, of course, but why does a pension win over just having wealth? Like, if you have, say, I don't know, a crore or some very large amount of money, which is probably the future value of those payments, or sorry, the present value of those payments, wouldn't you rather just have that yourself? You can be aggressive if you want, you can invest it conservatively or defensively if you want, you can do it tax efficiently. It's in your control, and with Indian infrastructure today, you can handle it in a few clicks or a few taps on a phone. You don't depend on anyone, you don't have to go up to an office and prove you're alive every year. So can you explain a bit about why pensions have such a hold, or why they're so attractive to so many people?
Yeah, that's a great question. We start with a concept of, I want a monthly cash flow guaranteed in some way and also linked to inflation. Incredibly good as a proposition versus giving me a big lump sum right now and letting me figure out what's happening. And I think the government has actually tried to do this forever, and there have been 3 kinds of schemes. First was the old pension scheme, where the government was like, trust me, bro, I will give you your money, whatever this pension thing is, after you retire. So the trust me, bro had a problem, which is that I make the promise, but I am a politician and I go out of power, and the next guy who comes in has to pay out. So it's like almost like, excuse me, why do you make all these promises without, kind of having a fund structure that would actually do something about it? Then they created the National Pension Scheme, which was at the time the new pension scheme. The National Pension Scheme is NPS, which is simply that, listen, the government's not going to promise you anything. We're just going to take a portion of your salary and we're going to put something ourselves. So 10% from you, 14% from the government, all goes into this thing which is marked in your name, and that you choose a manager and you choose something, and then the money keeps going up. And the money keeps going up over a period of time, and in the end you get this massive lump sum, and then that massive lump sum says, oh well, you know what, 60% comes to you, 40% you use to buy something that gives you a monthly income. So by and large, this sounds like a great deal, and to be honest, it is for many reasons. We'll come to that. But then there was still a demand for, no, this 40% gives me very little. So if I made 2 crores in my overall account, you're going to give me 1.2 crores right now.
Up to.
Yeah. No, or
I think by default.
By default. But I can go up to 1.2 crores. The remaining 80 lakhs goes to buy whatever thing. And that 80 lakhs gives me, because if I buy an annuity, which is what I need to buy, they pay you 4 lakhs per year. Now 4 lakhs per year is 30,000 rupees per month. So the person receiving it and says, forgets the fact that he got this 1.2 crores up front and says, you give me only 30,000 rupees per month. I was expecting 50, 60,000 rupees. I should be getting that much, but you give me only 30,000 rupees. But you're not getting only 30,000 rupees. There's a big lump sum component involved. But the uncertainty of all of this has made people feel that no, let the government just guarantee our income. So the government has created the unified pension scheme. I mean, the problem with naming something new is you got to name something newer, which is unfortunately a problem. But the UPS is basically the government saying, listen, 50% of your basic pay we will give you when you retire. Don't worry about it. But we will actually earmark funds for this purpose by putting 18% of your income in some place and 10% of your income that you pay in, and the 28% in total goes towards paying out of this pension to you eventually. Now, by and large, this is okay. Now, I want to ask you this. This is a very strange and serious question. If I told you, Shray, you will get 50,000 rupees a year from now for the next 30 years. You're 60 today. You're going to get 50,000 rupees a month every month for the next 30 years. But this 50,000 increases by inflation every year, 5% inflation every year. Or take 1 crore right now and forget me, I'm not going to pay you anything per month. Which option would you take?
So I would take the 1 crore because look, the 50,000 per month is like what, 6 lakhs for the first year, right? So if I could take the 1 crore and put it in just a Nifty index fund or a Nifty 50 plus Nifty next 50 fund, I would hopefully make over a long period of time 12% a year. Say a couple of percent go for tax when you redeem them, that's still 10. Another 4-5 go for inflation. I still end up with basically more money to spend, and my corpus keeps growing. So I would rather just have the lump sum and have it under my control.
This is a great way to look at it, because what you're saying is I will make 12% on this corpus, and at 12% this corpus is worth more than 50,000 rupees a month, even with inflation increases. Because what you're really saying is, listen, mathematically, the number you need to make 50,000 rupees a month with 12% average returns is roughly 85 to 90 lakhs. That is all you need, which will generate that kind of income, and it will keep growing over a period of time and go to zero when you are 90 years old. That means that's the amount you need today to be able to sustain this 50,000 rupees a month, increasing at 5% per year for the rest of your life. The problem is that most people don't think like you, or many people don't think like you, especially in the government employee kind of a situation where they may not be able to trust the craziness of the market as much. They'll want to say, listen, I want to put it in an FD, and the FD is 50,000 rupees. It is 8% a year. Now, the same math, which was 90 lakhs at 12% a year, the pensionable corpus you need effectively to generate the same cash flows at only 8% per year is 1.5 crores nearly. That means 1 crore is actually not sufficient. So you should be taking the pension option. If you are a conservative investor, you should be taking the lump sum option if you're an aggressive investor. So the answer to this is twofold. Now, intuitively, this doesn't even make, there are other aspects to this. All pension is taxable, whereas your capital gains that you've generated using this 10-12% is actually subject to a much lower tax rate. So effectively, your taxes now determine which strategy you might take. And I might take the 1 crore, even if I were a conservative investor, simply because the tax rate on the pension is so high that my post-tax income is better with the 1 crore than it is with the pension itself. There are so many complications due to this, but one of the reasons why, and let me tell you this, the problem isn't mathematical, it's behavioral. The first thing is, when you start talking to government employees and you start looking at people that are around them, everybody wants something that says, oh, I get paid so much as a pension from the government. It is a matter of pride. It's also a matter of feeling involved and continuing to be something, because government benefits last beyond the stage that you lived in. The fact is the government is taking care of you even afterwards. Right? So the one is that behavioral thing.
It's almost like a reminder of the status or the respect that the government has for the service you've given.
Yes. The second big thing and the behavioral thing is, assume you have this, let's say you're in an economically tough situation, and you're in a family where one of your uncles is going to retire, and he's going to, you know that he's going to get this big lump sum payment on retirement, and you need maybe 20 lakh rupees to somehow make your business turn around. The minute he retires, you're going to go to uncle and say, uncle, you're getting this big lump sum, and maybe you don't, maybe maybe you should give me 20 lakhs.
It's a loan.
As a loan. Yes.
Or investment in my business.
Yes. And the problem becomes that these people, you can't say no to because they're your relatives. And yet you know that this 1.21 crore or whatever that big amount that you're receiving is not actually for giving away. It is for you to invest so that the income that it generates replaces your pension. So I gave you a lump sum thinking that you'll earn a pension out of it, but somebody came and borrowed it from you, and now you're thinking, I don't have interest and I don't have an income. And what the hell. So you have a behavioral problem in being able to say no. If instead I told you I'm only paying you a pension, you can easily tell this nephew of yours, which is me, which is, sorry Deepak, I don't get any money. I have this pension, I get 50,000, but my kharcha is 50,000 rupees a month, so I can't spend it. So behaviorally, I like the concept of a pension saying, boss, don't make me say no to my relatives. I would rather get this pension product. The third thing is behaviorally, I am not attuned to high volatility. I don't want to invest 1 crore and make it, say it fall down to 80 lakhs, then go up to 1.2 crore, then fall to 1. So I'm like, what is this? I mean, if I put it in an FD, it never goes down. I would rather it never go down. So convincing people about volatility is a problem. So the behavioral challenge on how you deal with pensions versus you deal with lump sums. So I think we should address this as a behavioral option and say, what is the equivalent that can make you, because if it's behaviorally attractive, it's like, my traditional problem of buying a house for the financial investment doesn't make sense, but behaviorally it does. It's an emotional investment. And so the same thing I would say for a pension, it is emotionally desirable in many cases, not in all cases, but in many cases, where you want to avoid these behavioral issues of volatility, nephews trying to land grab your money, and things like that.
I think one thing that I think we've both remarked and joked about in the past is a lot of our society is built around the monthly income concept. So whether it's getting like a loan approval, well, hopefully you're not taking loans in your retirement, but you get my point. Like
we do have that problem. We have that issue of, if you apply for a credit card, you could be the richest person in the world. They won't give you a credit card because they say you don't have any income. And I'm like, excuse me, because credit cards in India are supposed to be unsecured loans. You can't get a credit card against a security of a deposit meaningfully. So what happens is they all ask you for what is your income, and you're just wealthy. You don't have an income at this point. You don't get a credit card, and that is just astounding to me.
Well, I guess the thinking is if you have the money, just spend it. Why do you need the credit card?
Yeah, one is that. But then sometimes you need to buy stuff from abroad, for which they don't accept debit cards. They don't, you can't do money transfers. They want you to put a credit card number, and you need a credit card with that kind of balance to be able to do it. So they'll give you a credit card, 1 lakh rupees of balance. And then you're like, 1 lakh rupees for a person who's immensely wealthy is insane. And, you're right, institutionally we are challenged to deal with wealth versus income. So, as an example, if I'm going to I'm going to sponsor my son's education, it isn't enough that I should demonstrate that I have so much wealth to be able to sponsor his income. I also have to demonstrate that I have the income to be able to, sponsor his education. So I think the institutionally we've become more channeled towards income, and it's a little sad because wealth sometimes can, for instance, if I don't actually take out my money, I have no income. I mean, I've decided I have some income, I have some money, I'm going to spend it, but I don't actually generate income every year. My income tax return shows nothing. And then somebody asks you for 3 years of income tax returns. Then you have like this, and they're like, where's the money? There's no money, you don't have any money, you're just pretending. You're showing them this big, fat, CAMS plus KFIN statement that shows I have so much money, 10 crores. Well, you where's the income? Yeah. Come on now. So that's the conceptual problem of this income. So I think we like people with income. We don't like people with not don't like, but we just don't respect people with wealth. Like I had to say, I hate billionaires. But you would not mind a person making $50 million a year. Because, although you find that extremely high, but you actually hate billionaires more. Because you keep feeling that a person is earning money is somehow spending that money. But the person who's got wealth is hoarding that wealth. I think that's how the challenge is, maybe emotionally as well. But I guess that's a different tangent to this whole thing. But it's interesting that, we because we perhaps see that in our daily lives, we like the fact that so most of our, even when we talk to people in the PMS, we talk to people in general, the idea was, how much do you spend? So let's at least get you that kind of income during your retirement. It's not, but we translate it to, you need so much wealth, right? But instead, I explore you to think of it like this. If you're getting a pension of 50,000 rupees a month, it actually means you have wealth of 1.5 crores, because that was the amount it would have taken you to generate that 50,000 a month in a risk-free basis before tax.
All right. Since you brought up the corpus needed, let's just talk about the UPS, the Unified Pension Scheme, briefly. You ran some numbers. Now I know this has been covered to death, so it's unlikely that we have too much to add to this. But let's say under some set of assumptions, what really is the return you're making, because you are putting this money away and the government is matching to some extent, but what is really the return that you're making, or that the government is promising / offering you under some base case of assumptions that you worked on?
This is actually quite interesting, because the idea of the unified pension scheme is that you will get 50% of your basic salary increased at inflation for the rest of your life. And perhaps to your next of kin as well. And some part of this formula applies to defense employees as well, but defense employees, actually, they don't do a contribution and all that. Because you're working defending the country, we'll give you a pension from our policies. But the government employees who are central government employees, non-defense, they will put 10% of their income, 18% of their income will also go into the UPS, into their account effectively, as a separated boxed investment. Whatever it does, it should return as much to return this 25%. I mean, I'm assuming your basic is 50% of your total salary, and you have to get 25% of that, 50% of your basic, and your basic is 50% of your salary. So 25% of your salary is what UPS kind of promises you. In order to get this, how much does the government have to get returns on this corpus in order to get there? I put all the numbers in a spreadsheet. Smoke flew out of the screen, this thing and all that, and eventually it told me that, listen, if your salary goes up by 5% a year, to make your 25% of your salary at the end of, say, 15, 18, 20 years, you're going to need the growth rate of about maybe 5 or a little bit less than 5% a year, in order to make those cash flows from something as, from the corpus. That means if whatever the corpus is invested in gets 5% returns, that's the return that you're going to, that's enough to make your pension needs. So to the government, this is a sweet deal. But the government, so I went back and said, listen, how much have government salaries increased by? So something that was in every 10 years, there's a pay commission. In that pay commission, they increase the basic salaries of most people, or total pay of most people. And what was 2750 in 1996, I think?
So 2000, on just under 3,000, yeah.
Just under 3,000
per month,
let's say, per month. Went up to 18,000 rupees by 2016. There were two pay commissions in the middle. 1996 to 2006 and 2016. I think 1996 or something was the pay commission, but once in 10 years. There's a latest pay commission in 2025. That 18,000 will become 41,000 rupees per month. So what was 3,000 will become 41,000 and 30 years. So I put these numbers across and I said, okay, it's about 9% per year. For a salary that's increasing 9% a year, you need something that returns 9% a year at least, roughly, to be able to make the same grade. Now, NPS, which started in 2004, has possibly returned upwards of 9.5% for most of the government employees, and that's therefore made that grade. So you've got as much as you need in order to meet those goals over a period of time. Now, I would say that the UPS comes in as a replacement. The government has to take this investment and put it at something that returns this 9%. Now, this assumes that you live all the way till you're 90, or you and your spouse live all the way till you're 90, for 30 years after retirement, or 32 years, because retirement age is 58. What if you don't live till you're 90? The remaining corpus stays with the government. It doesn't come back to you. It's not like NPS, where you get the corpus. you invest it, and then if you die, your next of kin get the remaining, right? Here, the corpus is one big mesh corpus. They know that it will pay out. So there will be a point at which the corpus itself has to keep paying out. So some people may live more than 90, that's fine, because the people who died before they were 90 will kind of make up for the differential of what's there. So the unified pension scheme is a different beast altogether, and to make it not hurt the taxpayer tomorrow, they made sure that this corpus is in place. And if they invest it the same way the NPS does, or the EPFO does, there will be an equity component to it and there will be a debt component to it for them to get slightly better returns than just government. Remember, government 10-year bonds are at 6.4% and 30-year bonds are at 7%. So you need 9%. You don't need something that spruces it up, right? So that's the overall sequence of thought process of a unified pension scheme. Why is it attractive? Again, the behavioral thing of I'm guaranteed a pension by the government. But this 9% a year has been because India's inflation has been relatively high. Now, even now, the challenge is, though current inflation is at 3%, we've had very high inflation in the last maybe 10 years. And that inflation is what's being reflected in this change. But it's also political, because the government employees form a large pool of people. Those people are voters. So you don't want them to get hurt, and you want them on your side. So 1996, the salaries, 2006 rather, the salaries went up by 157%. In 10 years, 157% means 1 rupee became 2 rupees 57 paisa, or 10,000 rupees became 25,000 in that sense, right? So that was the number one jump. In 2016, there was a 240 odd % jump. That means in 10 years, 1 rupee became 3 rupees 40 paisa. Rather, sorry, 2 rupees 40 paisa, 240%. And then now the new number is 2.87. So 2.87 times is what you will make from your, so 18,000 becomes 41,000. That's the kind of calculation. So this, if you wanted to keep going 9%, then you're going to have to get 9% returns on whatever corpus you make. But I'm just looking at this from the perspective of how it is structured from the government angle, so that you can figure out what it means for you to replicate it. But what I mean to say is, if you get 9% a year, you've got this. That is how much your salaries have gone up as a government employee. And the UPS therefore is beneficial if you think you can't get 9% a year.
Let's turn our focus to private sector employees. We don't really have the option for the UPS, I guess. So for us, it's a question of whether you really seriously focus on the NPS to some extent, or just try and build up your own corpus and invest through stocks, mutual funds, and the like. How would you think through this trade-off?
Yes. So I think the big problem over here from a private sector employee point of view is that you are actually doing everything post-tax, sort of. Because in a pension product, what's happening is they're investing 10% of their money, and that 10% is also tax-free by a bunch of laws. Then there is another 18% that's invested in by the government. That's how the UPS works. So that means 28% of your salary is actually going into investment, but all of it is going pre-tax. There's no tax to you at the time of investment. Then it grows. There's no tax to you at the time of growth. When you take the money out, which comes as a pension, the pension is fully taxed. So exempt, taxed. Now let's look at the NPS. The NPS is maybe partly exempt when you're going in, up to 50,000 rupees a year, which is nothing. So it's only partly exempt when it's going in. So if you invest more than 50,000 a month, then 50,000 a year, then the remaining portion is post-tax, right? So it does not attract any tax when it grows. So it's exempt when it grows. And when you exit it, 60% is tax-free. The remaining 40% comes as an annuity, which is taxed. Which means I will make post-tax income on, I will make pre-tax income only on the 40% that is bought as an annuity. So I'm partially exempt going in, I'm exempt when it increases, and I'm partially exempt when it's coming out. A UPS is slightly less beneficial in comparison with the NPS. From a taxation perspective. Now you want to figure out what you want to replicate. I want to replicate, let us say, the NPS in some sense of the word. Now as a private sector employee, I can invest in the NPS. I can buy into the same thing that the NPS gets And in fact, if I chose the most aggressive option of the NPS, I would have made 11% a year for the last 20 years. Fantastic. However, I feel here that the issue is of people feeling that, listen, I make this 11% a year, but then 40% of my money is locked and 60% is unlocked and all of that stuff. So is there a better way? Let me then try and say, I want to replicate the UPS exactly in my account, the way it is. I want to make 25% of my salary. Then the answer to this is you have to invest in something that grows. Now, that something that grows can have multiple shapes. If I invest in debt, it has 8%, 7% maybe. If I invest in equity, we know about 10 to 11% in the past, possibly replicable because India is growing at maybe 6 to 7% a year. Inflation is maybe 4 to 5% a year. So 10 to 12% is what the indexes are likely to give you in the future. And it has been that. You look at the last 10 years, it's been 12%, which kind of meets this formula. By and large, if this formula succeeds, then you will get 10 to 12% from equities. So you want a combination of how much you need in equity and how much you need in debt. Maybe you need 90% and 10% debt, 90% equity, 10% debt to start with. Eventually, as you go along, you want lesser and lesser debt, lesser and lesser equity in your portfolio, but you're adding money every month. So you kind of save every month towards building this corpus. You know exactly what you want to build. That 1 crore per year is equal to 6 crores per year in 30 years. So you need to keep getting there. And that is how you'll build yourself a pool. That pool is yours. Now you have the crazy nephew problem, which is the crazy nephew will come and ask you for a loan, but you'd never tell him you have such a corpus. That's the point of a retirement pension that you build on your own. You pretty much say, I don't have any money. So unless of course your nephew is the banker. But other than that, I would say the issue is of just saving that much money, the same amount of money that you would have saved had you been a government employee, and getting there. As I said, this is where it gets very interesting. To generate 1 crore today, roughly, in a span of 30 years. Now the answer, let me rephrase the problem. I want to generate what is worth 1 crore today in 30 years. I'm 30 years old and I want to get to that 1 crore today. I'm thinking in 30 years, 1 crore today is actually equivalent to 6 crores at that time. Now you're looking at me and I have 6 crores, come on, man, I don't have that much money. But I'm telling you this is achievable with something, investing as little as 20 to 25,000 rupees a month. Now, 20 to 25,000 rupees a month will give you effectively the equivalent of roughly 50,000 rupees per month today. It will be higher, it will be about 2 or 3 lakhs at that time per month. By just saving this 20 to 25,000 rupees a month to go all the way down to your. So, private sector employee can actually replicate the unified pension scheme at a much lower rate, because instead of saving 28% of your income to get 50,000 today, now 50,000 is 1/4 your income, because the UPS pays you 50% of your basic. Basic is 50% of your income. That means you're actually making 2 lakhs a month today. And I'm saying you need to save just 25,000. That's about 12% of your income. So instead of saving 28% of your income, you need to save 12% of your income. And the 12% of your income is post-tax. So let's assume you're paying a tax of 30% also. That means you're saving 18% of your income pre-tax in order to get there, instead of 28% that the government is saving. So it's a very interesting way for a private sector employee to build their own corpus. And we can go into more detail on how to structure this over time.
I'd like to take a deeper dive into pensions. I have I think 3 parts of them that I really want to think about from a structure or behavioral angle. The first is the forced savings aspect. The fact that once you've kind of signed on, especially as a government employee, you really have no say in the matter. You're going to have to pay this every month, whether you like it or not. It really doesn't matter what crisis you're facing. How does that sound?
You know, that's the behavioral angle probably missed in the first part, which is that you're saving and then you're spending. So in the sense of you never even see this money. It goes off from your salary to the first thing in the month, and then you get only the remaining which is to spend. Which is the big difference between having the money and choosing whether you have to save or spend. And I don't say this is for only the less economically or less wealthy individuals. It happens even for me, where I have money And one day I'm thinking, let me not invest this month because I have a big credit card bill to pay. I don't know why I do that. It's not like it's going to be meaningfully changing. I should have invested something or the other. But no, I let it ride in my bank account, simply thinking that, oh, when it comes, I'll spend. So the issue is that this behavioral challenge of saying, I am forced to invest. And I think that has a change which is actually meaningfully good, even for people like me. One is that. But the important thing about forced savings is this: it has a downside. There are times in which you can't save because you really need the money. It's an operation, this, that, and all that. So the government usually creates an out. They'll create a pension thing which says, oh, you can take a loan from your pension or take an advance from your pension. And when you do that, you pay some taxes or you pay a high interest rate. That kind of discourages you from doing it in normal situations, but you take it out only when you have a crisis, and then you take it. The point is, you're forced saving every month. You're taking out from, instead of taking out money and paying taxes on it, why can't I just not put in money? Well, you're forcing me to do that anyways. And the forced saving does have a problem for someone. The biggest challenge in your case, which you said, that I'll invest in something that gives me 12% return. My pension is not going to invest in something that gives me 12% return simply because it thinks that I am too, because they are looking at the population and saying, since I'm doing this as a pool level for everybody, I can't take too much risk. And I'm looking at them saying, guys, the market is cheap, I need to buy it. But you're taking away my money before I see it, so I can't even choose to spend it somewhere else. So in that sense, the government is deciding on my behalf. It isn't the nicest thing in the world. The forced saving works, somebody told me this forced saving argument about LIC, and I think there are good and bad aspects to it. For instance, I was forced to save 5,000 rupees a month every year for 30 years, from 1996, not 30, 25 years, from 1996 to 2021. Well, it was 2020 actually, because they take the premiums in advance. During COVID, I got this payout of 1 lakh rupees. Now you're looking at me and saying, Deepak, 25 years, 5,000 rupees a month. You got this 1 lakh rupees back. They paid some token amounts earlier, but I was like, I got 1 lakh rupees during COVID, which I didn't expect. Because I didn't see this 5,000 rupees a year go, sorry, not a month, but a year. But a year go away in the past. So just to give you an example of how it worked, 5,000 rupees a month for 25 years sounds like, it's a waste of time because 5,000 rupees is not changing my life. Neither did the 1 lakh rupees that I got at the end of it. But that 1 lakh rupees came as a lump sum at a time when I was like, oh, I have some money to spend. And 1 lakh rupees was a reasonable amount of money to spend. And it was bigger than the 5,000 rupees was at that time. So that forced saving in that sense helped me. But it doesn't help me when you tell me, Deepak, let's bump this up to say 1 lakh a month. Instead of 5,000 rupees a year, 1 lakh a month. 1 lakh a month, I could do a lot better than this miserable 4% odd return that I got in that insurance product. Because if I had done it in any other proper product, I would have had 5 lakh rupees at the end of it, instead of the 1 lakh rupees that I actually got.
I think another aspect of pension is the fact that it is held away and you can't really access it, even though you gave some examples of how under extreme circumstances you can. So the fact that it's held away from you and you can't access it till you retire. How does this sound?
This is actually great on the second behavioral thing that I talked about, which is you have this crazy nephew problem of somebody coming and borrowing the money from you. Now, if you had to take a loan, you wouldn't to give your nephew some liquidity, right? Because it's almost like, listen, I'm sorry, this is not an emergency. This is not my emergency. I can borrow it for my emergency, but I can't, So that's one thing. The second one is when it's kept away from you and you can't access it, there is a small behavioral change. I'll give you this example. Let's say you had two mutual funds and one of them gave you 12% per year return. One of them gave you a 20% per year return. But the 20% product has no exit load. You can get out anytime you want, no problem. The 12% per year product has a 4-year exit load of 3%. Now you're thinking, I need the money. Which one do I get out of? I have already received 20% from one and 12% from the other. I choose the product which has no exit load, not because it is better or worse, but because the exit load was this factor that said, I don't want to lose 3% exit load just because I needed the money. Let me take this thing that has 20%. It has anyway done better, so I can book some profit. So you'd rather book some profit than take a less performing product out of your portfolio because there was a 3% exit load to it. I understand there might be mathematics involved and all of that stuff, but it's a behavioral thing as well. Even if I told you one product has returned 80% and another product has returned 12%, you'll still choose to exit the 80% product just behaviorally, right? Because there's no exit load. Whereas if both have the same exit load, instantly you'll choose the 12% product. Now, this is the problem of that keeping things away from you. Is like once it's kept away from you, you want to get out of it last, even if it had liquidity in some extreme circumstances. I can pledge my policies and take a loan against it. I can do that anytime I want. But the minute I do that, I know I'm going to pay an interest on that loan. So I would rather take anything else that I have lying around than to take a pledge on these policies, even though those policies are terrible performers. So this keeping things away from you has a very strong, behavioral attribute that you don't exit it when you need the liquidity the most. So in a way, the forced saving is also the last saving you liquidate.
The last thing that comes to mind to me is it's sort of guaranteed. I mean, I know there's no such thing as a real guarantee, but it's sort of guaranteed. So you don't need to worry about whether the economy is doing well or the economy is doing badly, whether markets are volatile, whether markets are not, whether we're in wartime or not. You kind of don't need to worry about any of this. It is just a payout that comes to you from the government, to the extent you trust your government.
This is a great idea from a pension perspective, that you invest in something that has some kind of a level of a guarantee. But I will say this. There is no need to continue to stay invested in the most risky products forever. You want the risk during the time when you don't need the money. But as you get closer to the point that you need the money, you're going to need to slowly move your money into a safer product over a period of time. Now, this can be done in many ways. We can discuss those. But the idea is that practically, you should never have 100% equity in a product that is, let us say, 1 year away from pension. You want smaller and smaller portions of it that are available to you from the equity perspective. And when I say smaller, as in instead of being 100%, you should be 70%, or maybe 50%, or maybe 40%. You should have some, but not all of it. The remaining should be in these safe, quasi-guaranteed kind of schemes, and you can do liquid funds, which are kind of guaranteed in the sense, not guaranteed, but they are less volatile, significantly less volatile. And to the extent that you can depend on the regulatory ecosystem to be strong enough to say a liquid fund is not going to go bust in the next few months, in the next few years, and all of that stuff. So you want to be aware of the fact that is your risk. Your only risk is that something goes bust. But it's also true that those risks are there with the government, because at some point you have issues that the government can, like the Western governments are trying to face, which is, after 2037, we're in a pickle. And then everybody's saying, well, you know what, I'm going to die before 2037, so I don't care. But the rest of them are like, excuse me, wait, 37 is pretty much the age I am retiring. Can you please fix this problem right now? So you do have a problem on the government side of this pension thing as well, but you do have this feeling of safety that can be engineered in your own portfolio that says, listen, I'm going to have more and more portions in safe stuff. Equity is risky in the short term, but it's probably safer in the long term than it is in the short term. That means if I look at every 1 year period, there are about 33% of the time when I would have lost money. Any 1 year time, I take June 5th to June 5th of June 8th to June 8th the next year. Each one is a data point. Roughly 33% of the time, I have had a negative kind of a return, maybe 25 or 30% of the time. If I take the same thing to 3 years, June 5th of year 1 and then June 5th of 3 years after that in the past, and I say, well, how many times have you lost money? Well, 10% of the time. So I mean 90% of the time I have made money. I have made a positive return. So I have not had a chance of losing money. And then if you look at a 5-year period, there are almost no times when you lost money. So in that sense, if the risk is the risk of something falling below the investment value, that risk is lower and lower as your time goes by, even in equity. So you should have enough money in equity that can sustain itself for a longer time, because it gives you great returns in the long time frame, or good returns in the time frame. And your debt portion should be enough to satisfy your need for guarantees, which is safety, less volatility, and so on.
Okay. Can we look at the corpus? I have 3 points on when you do it alone and you just have a bunch of stocks, mutual funds, and so on, and you're trying to create things. So The first thing is it can be extraordinarily tax efficient, right? So I think the math works is that even if it's just you're comparing rates to rates, we're talking 40% at highest slab rate to something like 15% on long-term capital gains on equity/arbitrage. So, and that's if you were just selling all of gains, and if you're selling some principal as well, the taxes you pay can be minuscule compared to say anything that comes to you as a pension. So, isn't that a massive plus or a massive favorable factor for doing it yourself?
Yes, doing it yourself actually has the, and when I say do it myself, I'm saying don't buy a pension product, don't even buy anything. Just go on, create your lump sum. Maybe I should dwell on this in one, just to refine this. You save a certain portion of your income every month. It grows. You keep increasing the amount you save every month according to your income or your inflation in general. And over a period of time, you'll generate a very large corpus. That very large corpus is going to now be available to you. Now you've retired, now you need to do something with that money. You're going to take all of this money and put it somewhere. Maybe you're not going to take out all of it. It's already there. Maybe you rearrange it a little bit. But let me just say that, listen, I'll put it into an arbitrage fund, a certain amount of money. And I'll put a certain part of money into a debt fund, a certain portion of money into a equity fund. The returns on equity and arbitrage funds are taxed at 12.5% after a year. Now, recent tax laws have created more complications. The first 12 lakh rupees you receive, not as capital gains, but as an FD income or something like that, are tax-free. This is a problem for you because you're thinking, if I get 12 lakhs, it's tax-free if I get it as income from an FD. But if I get the same 12 lakhs as capital gains, I have to pay 12.5% net. Oh, come on, that's bad. But I mean, these are tax challenges that happen every year. Every year, if we do this podcast again, I'll have a new tax loophole to throw at you. But assuming that in general, you will have other sources of income in any ways. You may be turning 60, but you may have a consultancy. You may have a house you bought for rent. You may write a book and receive royalty. Don't count on that, but still, I would say there are other sources of income that may come your way simply because you refuse to lie idle and do nothing. You will have some kind of income just being generated. And you have FDs because no matter what we say, we all need emergency funds, and maybe an FD is a good option. So whatever your other sources of income are eating into this 12 lakhs. So effectively, any pension that you create is an incremental income that is beyond this core basic income. Now, beyond this core basic income, you're looking at a taxation of 20% at least in most of the other cases, and 12.5% right now on long-term capital gains in it. So the difference is so large that I could actually tell you that instead of 50,000 rupees a month, which post a 20% tax is 40,000 rupees a month, I want to generate the same 40,000 rupees a month using a pensionable product. I can actually generate only 45,000, which will give me the same post-tax 40,000, simply because the taxation is so much better for a lump sum based return calculation. And it might actually end up being that because I have to generate a lesser return, I don't have to generate 40, 50, I have to generate 45. I need a smaller corpus. I don't need 6 crores, I need 5 crores or 5.5 crores. So I effectively have a much lower corpus requirement if I use a capital gains based return. And this, by the way, is worldwide. Everywhere taxation applies differently for capital gains and differently for income. So in Canada, I think it is it's 6/10. So 60%. So there's a 40% lower tax. If you pay 100 rupees on tax on income, you will pay 60 rupees tax if it's the same capital gain. America, it is I think half, or I mean roughly half. So there's a vast difference in how income is taxed as capital gains versus how income is taxed when it's income of any other sort. So you get an advantage for doing the lump sum based investment. So in that sense, the private sector employer that does it himself probably has an advantage.
Then I'll come to the disadvantage. It's super volatile. I don't care whether you have debt, you have equity. Even debt moves up and down, as I've realized. There's interest rate cycles, so that's not that particularly great either. And equity, to chhodi do. I mean, it is truly frightening at times. So the fact is that if you're doing it by yourself or you're going the corpus method, don't look at it too often because it is going to terrify you.
You know, this is so true after you reach certain numbers. See, when you're in the beginning of your investing cycle, you're literally, let's say you make 1 lakh a month, right? And you're investing 20% of it, so 20,000 rupees a month. After 6 months, you have 1.2 lakhs. Behaviorally, that's like a month's salary. Big deal. After a year, you have 2.4 lakhs. You're still thinking 2 months, 1 quarter, that's all it is. So when that, let's say after a year, it's 2.4 lakhs that you've invested, right? It falls 20%. Its fall is by 48,000 rupees. So you're thinking, okay, you know what, it's down 48,000, but still that's half a month of income for me. This is no big deal. I'll just earn it in half a month. Once you pass the 3-year time frame or 5-year, 10-year time frame, you're looking at corpuses that are something like, I have a corpus of 1 crore. And now I'm earning 2 lakhs a month. Now this corpus falls by 20%. That's 20 lakhs. That's 10 months of a salary. Oh shit, I have to work for 10 more months just to make up this loss. That's the way you think. Your brain is wired to think like that. The law of big numbers means it just scares us beyond a certain point, right? So now you're not thinking that it's only a 20% fall. You're thinking it's a 20 lakh rupee fall. This changes perspective when it comes to this volatility. So I think that is the behavioral challenge we have. I could do 2 things. I could educate you, saying it's only 20%, boss. It's not a big deal. And you might look at me and say, this 20 lakh rupees, this is a big deal. So I have to kind of educate you to, or find a way to explain that this is not a big deal and 20% can be made back over time because markets are meant to be volatile. Or the other thing is I can say, forget. You have again a bifurcated, how do you forget? First, I don't show you your value every day. This is how real estate works. Nobody knows what the value is. And if somebody sells a house cheaper than when you bought it, you say he's stupid. You don't say that I've lost money. You say he's stupid. Why did he sell? He was desperate to sell. When it goes up, of course it's gone up because of what I lived in it. So that's I'm just saying that's the way you do it. By not knowing the price of it on a daily basis, it has actually kept you away from that volatility. I wish there was one product like this which simply said you're going to get to see it once a quarter or once a year. People don't like this because they don't want to be surprised once a year.
I think there are some AIFs that might be doing
that might be doing this. Yes. So it's easier for you to remove that flexibility. The other one is to buy products that are necessarily less volatile in nature. Now you could do this in many ways, simply by saying I'll buy a fixed deposit equivalent product or liquid fund, or they're close to all of these less volatile products. So when I have a lot of short-term debt in my portfolio, that short-term debt is almost necessarily by nature not volatile. So I never find a major dip in my savings for the most part. Now I'm assuming I am putting the caveat here that some mutual funds have seen losses in the past. So you should be careful even in liquid funds. But if you have a short-term debt strategy, you'll necessarily be less volatile, right? And the equity strategy can go 20% down at a time. So you have a debt strategy that doesn't go down meaningfully, and an equity strategy that can go 20% down at a time. What if you did half and half? Now you have 50% equity, 50% debt. Don't look at the debt product in isolation. Don't look at the equity product in isolation. Look at them together. When you do look at them together, you have maximum fall in 10%, and that's okay. So at that 1 crore falling to 90 lakhs, I'm fine with. I should be looking at 50 lakhs invested in debt, that's not fallen. 50 lakhs was invested in equity, that's fallen 10 lakhs. So that would hurt me more. Now the way to do this is to buy a balanced product perhaps.
I'll just come to that because that was my third point kind of. You have to do a lot of work. You have to rebalance it. It's not just enough to start investing these, but you have to keep track of tax laws. You have to figure out that this year I should sell this and move it here, or interest rate cycles are high. So doing it yourself is not a particularly hands-off solution, I would think. Is that also true?
Well, it's true if you compress the entire 20-year time frame down to like 15 seconds. It sounds like in those 15 seconds, I have so much to do. Oh, I'm putting money in, it's moved out, it's moved down. If you look at it that way. But in reality, it happens as if you're watching paint dry. Because let us say you woke up once a year, just once a year, and the only thing you did was look at your portfolio. You would say, oh, my equity portion has gone up because the market's gone up. I need to put more into debt to rebalance my portfolio. So let me sell the equity, put it into debt, and go back to sleep. You wake up the next time and say, what happened? The market crashed. So let me move my equity to debt. Things like that. And meanwhile, you're investing every month. So it does sound like a lot of work to do every time you wake up. But if you're living through it, the idea is ignore it till the thing happens and slowly. So since I'm investing every month I can do a check. What's my equity? What's my debt? Equity is more than 75%. I should be less than 75%. So this month's SIP goes to debt. And the next month, equity is lower. Let me put my SIP next to equity. And that's all I have to do. So it's a once a month decision, relatively easy to make. An advisor can make it for you. You have now mutual funds that do this automatically. So for instance, they're called balance funds. So they say, listen, we'll maintain our 75-25 or we'll maintain 65-35. Whatever it is, we'll maintain it. Don't worry about it. So you're saying, listen, if I keep giving you money, if your equity goes up, you will sell and do this and all that stuff. You'll be like, yeah, don't worry, just do it. And the other part is you could use an interesting product that is not available in India, unfortunately, which is in the US, you have something called target date funds as well. So you could actually buy one of those. Now, what those target date funds do is essentially keep equity exposure high in the beginning and reduce them over a period of time. That means you might start with 100% equity, you'll come down to 20% equity by the time the target date, which is maybe 10 years down the line, happens. So since the mutual fund has automatically reduced its equity exposure, you just have to invest in that mutual fund every month. Now you can't do this in India because this can only be done abroad. But I hope they allow such a product in India as well, and that will be quite an interesting way for people to not have to manually rebalance when building their own pensionable corpus over a long period of time.
I have a question about that, but I wanted to ask you two questions before that, both tackling, if I may call it, the leap of faith or the fantasy or whatever you have to believe to think that your do-it-yourself method or that your pensions will work. So if you look at pensions, what you're hoping is that unlike, say, in Europe or whatever, where it looks like governments face very dire public finances, they don't have enough young, or Japan for that matter, they feel that there's not enough young people. You may have a commitment from the government, and the government may be a perfectly sensible government who wants to help its people. But the fact is that the numbers don't add up. The math doesn't math, as they say. So how do you deal with the fact that in this world where populations are declining, populations are aging at least, there's this fears of many people may not be employed in the near future for whatever reason. How do you have this confidence in the government that they will be able to pay this out? I mean, if you look at the US, all of Europe, Japan, the fact is that it's like a problem everyone talks about, but we're just hoping something works out, right? So isn't there this massive leap of faith you have taken that even though the numbers don't add up, somehow this will just have a smooth landing?
Not only are you right, it's in fact, we've seen these challenges right now. I'll give you an example. Somebody did this pension math 40, 50 years ago and said, if we get all our employees to start saving into this pension plan, the money comes in, we can pay out all these pensions by getting a return of 8% a year. And that time it sounded great because 8% a year was easily available even in fixed income. So they said, we'll put our money into government bonds and then we'll wait. Well, guess what? Government bonds, after COVID, they reduced the government bond. In fact, during even the great financial crisis after that, most of these foreign countries reduced their interest rates to as little as 0%. In fact, sometimes negative as well. Now, this is all right for if you're initially purchased your bond at 8%, you're going to definitely make the 8% from all the way. But now I have new inflows coming in and they're going at 0. So my corpus has a lot of bonds at 8%, but a lot more bonds at 0%. My blended yield has come down to 2%. So now I'm getting psyched saying, I have to get 8% to pay out. These people are alive today. They are not still working, but I know they're going to retire in 2030, 2035. So how am I going to get this 8% to pay them? What they did was they went and levered themselves by borrowing money against the government bonds they had bought.
At very low rates.
At very low rates. And putting that money back into government bonds, saying, if I borrow at maybe 0.5% and buy government bonds at 2%, I'm still making that a 1.5% extra on the same thing, and I lever it 3-4 times and somehow generate this 8% thing. The problem was when inflation started to hit after the Ukraine war. So COVID, the inflation went down first, and then the Ukraine war was when So the interest rates in the markets went up. When interest rates in the market go up, bond prices fall because the yields go up. So I bought a bunch of bonds and they're worth 100 today, and tomorrow they're worth only 85
On mark to market.
mark-to-market basis. I've lost $15 or 15 pounds just on the market valuation. That would have been great if I held $100 of bonds. I held $25 of bonds. I borrowed against it, bought another $75 of bonds. So now I have 4x leverage. I've lost $15
On 25.
on 25. That is ridiculous. This is a hole that I can't meet. So the government had to change a bunch of rules about mark to market. They said, okay, you find a way to reduce this leverage, but meanwhile we have to kind of, not show the world that you're so and truly, beyond redemption. That things change. And I won't come to that meaningfully, but people are watching and saying, excuse me, that's my pension. Are you guys going to go bust and therefore not be able to pay my pension? Is that a problem? And in America, they did another thing, which is they created Social Security. They said everybody who saves money has to, who earns money has to save something for Social Security. So inflows were very high. They could pay out the Social Security from just the inflows. I don't need to invest that money. I just, whoever's new is coming in, give it to whoever wants money. But as people grow older, you suddenly realize that the number of people that need Social Security are much greater than the number of people who are putting in. So you have to now stop getting Ponzi about it and start getting real about the fact that you have interest rates that are at an all-time low relatively, and are now no longer at an all-time low, but still. Your issue now is that you don't have enough money coming in order to pay all of that this thing going out. And mathematically, you can see as more people retire and they want their Social Security payouts, there will be a day in which your earnings, inflows plus earnings from whatever you have, are going to be lesser than the amount that is required to pay out for Social Security. So there is a crossover time frame. That crossover time frame is now approaching reality in America, which is why you're suddenly starting to say, we got to fix Social Security. You don't have to fix Social Security now. You had to fix it 20 years back. But because you didn't fix it then, you now have a problem. And now that problem is going to need somebody to refuel this entire system, or go to people and say, excuse me, you're rich enough, please don't take Social Security. This is going to be a problem.
No, I mean, this has been covered, right? I think George W. Bush campaigned in his second term on this, but it was so unpopular he had to give it up. I think I vaguely remember seeing a House of Cards episodes on this as well. So the fact, your point is taken. So, but then how do you deal with this fact that your pension is basically a commitment from people who might be bankrupt?
So I think here is where your problem is this. You never got the chance to diversify away from the government. Whereas personally, you have the ability to say, I'll diversify. I could buy bonds from the government, but I could also buy bonds from the private sector. It would be strange to say that the government will default, but the private sector will not. But today, I almost trust that the Social Security system has a greater default risk in the US than Apple or Microsoft.
I want to come to that is my second question, which is like, I understand to some extent, or I've heard this because of, I think, unfunded pensions is something that kept coming up in college or whatever. I understand how that works. But right now, what worries me is, sure, you can be buying Microsoft stock and it seems to do very well for you and so on. But how can you continue to believe in this fantasy or myth or belief that these stocks will keep going up in a world where the US government might be bankrupt? Or perhaps the question more abstracted is, if the country is insolvent or is not doing well, can the stocks and the companies in that company be continuing to do well? And can you believe that?
That's interesting, because I think while we have a gloom and doom issue with what's happening in America right now, the country itself does not seem to be in the same gloom and doom in the stock market.
Yeah.
They seem to be in that situation of, oh, nothing's wrong, we'll figure it out. The we'll figure it out problem can never be solved in near term, because you'll always say, well, you know what, my country is okay. But I think fundamentally we have to look at where we are. There have been no countries with default, and I think we're going to see them. Japan is going to have a problem. So is Europe, and so is the other, set of countries like the US and Canada and so on. But is India going to have a problem, which is your problem as an Indian trying to figure this out, right? One of the issues is that there is a fundamental growth story that has been happening in the last 20, 30 years. We're probably early into this into the growth cycle, and we were very late to the party. The party in the West started 40 or 50 years back. We've just crossed $2,700 in per capita income. So are we in that situation which says, this is going to reach $5,000 and then stop? Even China, which is in bad shape from a population perspective, has no problem in terms of government financing meaningfully yet, though they do have a problem of declining population. So that has productivity implications and perhaps growth implications. But I don't think it has a meaningful implication yet in terms of social security and pensions. The issue with this is, can you expect the stock market to grow continuously up over a long period of time? And I think
when the underlying country may not be doing so well.
Yeah, the underlying country may not be doing so well. The answer to that comes back to what has happened when these countries didn't do well economically in the past. The global financial crisis came about. Stocks fell like crazy. But then the country went and made 0% interest rate, blah, 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 and then they got back. So countries don't easily die on man-made economic issues. If they get into situations like Zimbabwe, where there's a hyperinflation, there's of course a different part, I think, but most of the rest of the world is more likely to kind of respond in a way that fixes their economy over a long period of time than otherwise. So I would say, if you're in India, regardless of our crazy population, bad traffic, we have somehow gotten by. And I think there is a strong possibility that we will go by, even America will find a way. Maybe that way is to deny some extremely rich people their pensions, which they will grudgingly eventually agree to do so. If you cloak it in enough patriotism, you can make it politically acceptable. But by the way, they did that in India. They said, if you want to protect your nation, you should give up your gas subsidy.
And that worked, I think.
That actually worked, because even me, I was like, listen, this 200 rupee subsidy per 1.5 months. I ordered a gas cylinder every 1.5 months. So I was getting a 200 or 250 rupee subsidy on it. I'm like, 250 rupee subsidy every 1.5 months is worth it. I mean, I can give it up. I don't care. They just asked and people gave. So it's possible that people can get fixed like this, right? So I don't think it's impossible that a government that is in financial stress may not be able to demand a little more time or patience or maybe even monetary contributions to be able to tide over that time. But your equities, which largely function on growth and demand, need a growing world. Now, if we don't believe in a growing world, in terms of economic prosperity, in terms of consumption, we might be okay. We might be in a problem in that sense. But I believe that the world will continue to grow. It will be countries like India that continue to shine. And somehow we will get by in case of a crisis. So in that sense, I know it's not the greatest of answers to say, trust me, bro, we'll do something. But I think this is one of those times when life finds a way, like the famous episode was, I think it was a dialogue.
I think it was dialogue from Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. Fantastic dialogue. Pierces through boundaries or all sorts of words which I don't really remember, but Jeff Goldblum said it in a magnificent way. But he did say life finds a way.
Okay, Deepak, enough about high-level stuff. Let's get down to brass tacks. I am a fortunate or unfortunate private sector employee who has to figure this out on my own. I can invest in the markets, but I need to know how to get started if I want to plan for this retirement kind of stuff so far away. So how much do I need to invest? What do I invest in? How do I deal with rebalances or changing allocations? And when I have to take money out, where do I take it from?
Okay, quick run through of all of these things. Firstly, this 25% of salary or 50% of basic, as people call it, I think that's a bad figure to look at. You should actually look at your actual expenses. If you're making too much of a salary, you don't actually spend that much. Do you actually need that much money coming into your bank account every month? Or if you are spending more than that, then don't you need more money coming in as well? The idea is to first figure out where you are. So maybe you're spending 1 lakh rupees a month today. And you're thinking, well, you know what, in 30 years at 5% inflation, roughly it will become 2 lakhs a month after 15 years. Then it will become 4 lakhs a month after 30 years.
Yeah.
And that's when I have to retire. I'm 30 years old today. I need 4 lakhs a month to be generated at that time. Now you want to calculate what kind of money you will need at that time to generate this 4 lakh rupees a month. 4 lakh rupees a month translates to roughly 48 lakh rupees a year, 50 lakh rupees a year. So 50 lakh rupees a year to generate, just looking at the core numbers, will be around say 10 crores. But now I think 10 crores is a lot of money. 10 crores is a lot of money. But how do you get there? So the answer to doing that would be investing an approximate amount of maybe 30 to 35,000 rupees per month is what you are going to have to invest in order to get to those numbers. Now those numbers are significantly large, so you might there's in 10 crores looks like a significantly large number. The actual number may be of the order of 6 to 7 crores, but I'm just giving you the rough number of what we are coming to. But if you need to save 30 to 35,000 rupees, that's the amount of money you need to generate, and your corpus target is say 10 crores. Every month you're going to put this money. Now where do you put it? Now that's the other question. Now I know I have 30 years, so I can be very highly equity today. So I might choose an equity fund to say I'll start off my investments here. So for the first 10 years to 15 years, I'm just going to keep putting money into the equity fund because I have a long time remaining to the point I have to get to retire. So I keep putting money in there. Every year I bump up this 30,000 rupees to 33,000, maybe 35,000, and so it keeps going up. By the end of 10 years, I'm probably investing 60 to 70,000 rupees a month now. And by the end of 15 years, I'm probably investing even more per month. I've gotten to a certain stage, and now every year I can say, listen, I've only put in money in equity. I'm expecting a return of maybe 10 to 12% a year. I know where I need to be at the end. If I started with 30,000 rupees a month, in 1 year, I should be at roughly 4 lakhs or 5 lakhs. If I take that 5 lakh rupees, 30,000 rupees a month again, up to 35,000, next year I need to be at 10 to 11 lakhs. And I can give you these numbers in a broad nutshell, but I think you will be able to track your progress compared to where you should be at every month during this line and adjust accordingly. So maybe some lump sums to kind of bring the money back out and some downsides. And then this is how you are going to invest, but then where? So you might say, Deepak, there are 4,000 mutual fund options because there are maybe 400 mutual fund schemes that are available and each of them has 4 options. So what should I do? So typically, mutual funds have a growth option. So that's one way. I don't even think that I should even tell you that mutual funds are the best way or the FDs are the best way or something else is the best way. It doesn't matter where you invest as long as you have the transparency of knowing where you are at any given point in time. So don't give money to something that says, I'll tell you after 10 years where you are, and you don't know what they actually do. So you want to put money in something where you know roughly once a year also where you stand. And that when you know where you stand, you can readjust accordingly. So you invest on a regular basis into, say, a set of mutual funds. If I say equity, you might say, Deepak, what do I invest in equity? This is where an advisor might come in to help you. But if you don't know, there are options like going completely passive, go buy like the Nifty 50 or something like that.
Also buy next 50.
Or next 50, or the top 100 or the top 250 or something like that. That becomes one layer of operation where you don't actually make decisions. But remember, at this point, you're not going to look at this and say, oh, look, that one made 15% and this one made only 10%. How come I'm so bad? Because index funds are typically not going to give you the best returns of everything else. Although marketing material will make you want to think like that, when you actually look at the numbers, you rank everything in order, or when you go to some website which shows you the returns in some kind of a sorted descending order, your index funds are most likely not going to be always at the top. So it's likely to be that other funds do better. So you're going to have to. Otherwise, you might say, listen, I know my stuff a little bit. So can I find my way around? Can I buy some large, some mid, some small cap equities, some international equities? So I'll do a balanced strategy across all of
some gold.
Some gold also, yeah. I mean, gold is also volatile, so it has this thing. So I do a mix of all of them, and I put my money in this mixture, which part of my SIPs goes to each one of these things every year. I don't have to meaningfully, if I want to be tax efficient, I don't want to meaningfully change all of them, because anyway I bought like 5 or 6 mutual funds. So I do, one will do badly, one will do well, that's okay. As long as over a period of time, I continue to do this over a long period of time, this keeps me grounded towards saying, listen, my work is only once a year to figure out if my allocations have gotten out of whack, because my large cap may be X amount and I don't want it to be so much. and I want to reduce it somewhat. I mean, that's the only way I can think about. I might say, I want to reconfigure my SIPs because I'm going to increase it every year anyway. So where should I increase it is a question that I can do, or you could take the help of an advisor to do this. But this is just a plan. What's very interesting of this is it's building you equity exposure in the first 15 years. Now what happens after 15? You're now thinking I need debt because I don't want to keep on having only equity in my portfolio. So then my subsequent contributions can go to something that is either debt, if debt is tax efficient at that time. It's not right now. But you could use a hybrid scheme that is
more debt.
So if it's a 60% debt and 40% equity, it's still tax efficient because after 2 years, it's taxed at 12.5% income tax. So you could use that as a mechanism to invest subsequent SIPs. So you reach there, you are 100% equity, then subsequent investments are going into debt. So you're 99% equity, then 98, then 97, because your other stuff is growing every month. And maybe by year 25, you've reached a point where you're maybe 70-30, debt and equity. And that's the time when you might want to say, listen, I want to now slowly, maybe gradually move it into a 50-50 kind of a situation. And sorry.
Well, the point is, just think of your example, right? The person was 30 when they started planning. They're planning to retire at 60, and then I guess they're planning to live for another 30 years. So even when they retire, they still have 30 more years to go. So 100% debt probably never makes sense.
It doesn't. In fact, I would even say here is the better way to think about it. Let's say you got this big corpus, and let's say all of it is in equity funds because you forgot to do anything that I said. Just put it in equity. I've finished 30 years, I've ran it up, I've got 10 crores. Now what do I do? I'm saying, listen, what do you spend a month? You spend 50 lakhs a month. Fine. You spend
50 lakhs a year.
A year. Yeah, 50 lakhs a year. So for 3 years, you need 1.5 crores. Yeah. Okay. So guess what? Take that 1.5 crores out and put it into even a liquid fund. It doesn't matter. Take the least risky investment possible.
Or arbitrage
fund. Fund. Depending on how the tax situation is at that time. So you did that. Now you're left with 8.5 crores equity and 1.5 crores in debt. You're spending your 50 lakhs a month and it's going up by 5% a year, and I'm assuming that kind of makes up. So for 3 years you're set. You get to the closer to 3 years. The equity portion which is sitting in there is either growing or it's lots of volatility. It's going up and down. But over a 3-year cycle, like I said in the beginning parts, there's 90% chances that you've made in the past at least, you've made a positive return. So most likely it's at 8.5 or more, right? It's reaching that point. And then slowly you say, well, at the end of that time, take out another 1.5. In all probability, you might have made enough money for your remaining corpus to have gone back to 10. And let's say it's not also, it's maybe more than 10, maybe less than 10, whatever, but you take another 3 years of expenses. By this time, it would have gone to, instead of 1.5 crores, maybe 1.75 crores. So you take out that. And then you put that into a liquid fund, spend the next 2 to 3 years. If you do this, and we model this in multiple ways at some point, we said, okay, if you do this, it's very high chances that this corpus kind of grows at equity levels for the most part, and you're only using debt for 3 years of cash flow. This is great because this reduces your fear that I will not have money to spend. But it keeps the corpus invested in equity that is there. This is actually for people who don't mind the volatility, because things can go up and down a lot of the remaining equity portion, but keep focusing on the fact that, listen, for living, I am done. I have no problem whatsoever. And it's just this extra money that I have, which I might need from year 75 onwards, is where my risk is. But that's fine. I have enough time to live through that. And over a long period of time, you'll reach a point where most of your money can go into debt anyways. And I say this honestly, we should plan to live longer. Not that we want to
or don't want to, it may just happen.
I think it's the advances in science and hopefully the fact that we're all getting healthier at some level will propel us to say we want meaningful lives. I don't want to live in a wheelchair from the age 85 to 90 because all that money in my bank account is not going to buy me happiness. So I'm going to try and work my way out. But either ways, whatever it is, the money needs to be there regardless of whether I'm in a wheelchair or not, to ensure that that money can be available to spend for whatever reason I want. So you can do this in a linear way and say switch to debt almost completely to debt and stay with debt. Or I would say a better approach is just to do 3 years at a time or 5 years at a time. Keep cash flow in, use that cash flow. That's your bank account, and the rest of it just locked into equity over a long period of time.
That actually does make it sound surprisingly easy. So thanks for that. One thing which would make all of this a bit easier was some sort of a retirement account for private sector people as well. Some maybe enhanced version of an NPS. We did a whole episode some years ago about, you called it the Mera account. So we won't get into the whole thing, but could you give us a bit of a brief of what's the concept for how could a retirement account sort of help people with this?
The concept of a retirement account is only for solving that one difference between the government pensions and the private sector pensions. Now the difference between the two is in the government pension schemes, the government is putting in the money as an employer and the employee is not paying any tax. So pre-tax money gets invested. It's just that when they exit, the taxation is high. I say, why can you create a scheme like that for me as well? I want pre-tax money to go into something. That pre-tax money needs to be invested in a place that actually
is distinct.
It's distinct and keeps it. But don't determine who invests that money. Don't create a NPS or a EPS or an MPanel or an insurance company who is investing my money. Because you've given me a choice of a lot of investment products. There are 4,000 odd investment products. They're great. I want to invest in the same products. So let the investing products be for anybody. But the account from which I invest in it becomes tax protected to the extent that whatever I put into it, there's no tax. When I take it out, it is fully taxed. Even my next of kin, if I die and take the money out, that tax is paid before it's taken out. So it's like guaranteed taxation will happen at some point. So the government doesn't lose any money today. I mean, they may lose money today, but they'll make it up tomorrow. But I get to see my pre-tax money move upwards in every direction. It's called the Mera account. It's there as an IRA account in the US. They call it the 401k, they call it Roth IRAs, they call it something else IRAs. So whatever these, in the US it's called, in Australia it's called a super fund, where you can manage your own investment. The 401k in the US, you can put your money into a 401k account and use that money to invest in any ETF, mutual fund, stock also, by the way, individual stocks as well. I don't think in India this will fly as much today, maybe 10 years later it will. But I say you should have the concept of a brokerage account, a bank account as a combination to be a retirement account. Call it Mera. This combination is whatever money I put into the bank account can be invested through the brokerage account or can be invested in fixed deposits, all of which is untaxed until I decide to take even 1 rupee out of the fund. In the 1 rupee, I won't get 1 rupee, I'll get 70 paisa, so 30% tax or whatever, some tax is deducted even for that money. This Mera concept is great because earlier I was talking to you about this retirement target date funds. Retirement target date funds are useful because they do exactly this. The retirement target date funds essentially say, give me your money, I will rebalance internally. When a mutual fund in India rebalances, there is no taxation to the end individual and the mutual funds themselves are not taxed. So there is no tax implication that they have gone from 80% equity to 40% equity, no problem at all. Whereas I am saying that, listen, we want to be smarter. I want to do this. I want to withdraw 3 years at a time of this magnificent corpus. So let me have a Mera account where I can do whatever I want inside it. I can invest in anything I want. And beyond a certain point, only the money I take out into my bank account for actual spending is taxed. This is very good for me to watch my money grow before it is taxed. Because mentally you never say in your life that I have 1 crore in mutual funds, but you know what, if I exit, I'll only get 88 lakhs. Nobody tells you this. They say, I have 1 crore in my mutual funds, I have 1 crore in my mutual funds. It's all pre-tax money. If I told you that I have 1 crore in my Mera account, that's how rich I feel. I know that if I take it out, I'll get only 80. But I feel as rich as a crorepati or that I have a crore in it. So this changes human behavior and feeling of wealth as well. And America has $8 trillion in 401ks. $8 trillion, that's not a small amount. That's more than India's GDP into 2 right now.
Fair.
So that sounds like, I mean, that's what I'm saying. And they started the 401ks in 1980 or so. And it's what, 45 years? We could do this in our 45 years and get that wealthy as well. So Mera is actually a very interesting phenomenon, but there are, the challenges.
I want to come to the challenges because, I mean, we interact through work, personally and everything with RBI, SEBI, Finance Ministry, income tax. Increasing your personal wealth is not exactly their priority. It's making the country work. And governments are anyway short of for their budgets and they have deficits. So why would they be so generous to give you this tax exemption? What's in it for them? Them being loosely some set of government agencies who all have to cooperate and come together to make this idea come to life, right?
The problem is that I'm actually telling the current government to let go of its revenue to benefit a future government which will get even more revenue because you're paying the same tax on a higher corpus which has grown. Not easily palatable, but at some point somebody has to think long term in this country, and I think politicians are even longer term thinkers than us. Although we like to think of things that they think are short term, the fact that somebody created a scheme is useful for their own parties even 20 years down the line. So somebody who created X says, oh well, we created X. Even 20 years past, even if that program didn't exist, there was a green revolution. Somebody created a green revolution, and the green revolution actually helped us because we were otherwise bankrupt and didn't have any food. And we started the green revolution at that time. And now, guess what? We are oversupplied with wheat and rice in comparison. So much so that the government has to buy the excess, otherwise prices would go down to 1 rupee a kg. But regardless, that's one part of it. The problem is that we can't change things. I mean, me talking about it to you on a podcast is not going to make a government official suddenly say, oh my God, this is a fantastic. It has to be built into an ecosystem thought process. And because all other nations would have gone through the same process, I am sure somebody at some point in time woke up and said, this is actually a good idea. We should do this. And they did it in America, they did it in Australia, they did it in the UK. And I hope someday that they will do it in India. It may actually happen.
Would this reduce pressure on government finances? With people taking more ownership of their own retirement in the form of just it being a defined contribution rather than defined?
I think from a private sector perspective, the government keeps saying that we don't have social security. But if they found out that more and more Indians are investing into a 401k retirement account and getting themselves stable, they would be less worried. Like I think in America, a lot of the worry is augmented by the fact that people do save for their retirement. In Europe, people don't, because the government guarantees your income. Even if you're a private sector person, they are saying, listen, we guarantee so much of your percentage of your income. The minute you say that, in Social Security in the US, only a small, I think, $1,000, $800, something per month is kind of guaranteed by the government, and the remaining is you have to provide for on your own. You know that, so you go and save for yourself for retirement. The government sees this because they can see averages and say, well, you know what, so many people are okay, so many people are not. So I have to find a way to help the people who are not, but not reward them too much, because otherwise the people who did save will say, what the hell, why did we do? But in Europe, it's different. It's like, I'm going to get it no matter what. So you don't find that retirement products have a huge attraction in Europe. You find it that's more attractive in the UK, and it's extremely attractive here because we have nothing of any sort. But if the government did have a Mira kind of account, it would actually be able to tell people, listen, you have the Mira account, please go for it. You could replace parts of the pension program with this by saying, listen, you can, instead of the pensions being managed by a central government, you can take an NPS, which is currently there, and use the Mira philosophy to kind of invest it. So you don't need a pension, you can use the pension NPS if you want. That's another product you could buy off from your Mira account. But I'll give you the money in your Mira account, do what you want. So if NPS was the best product to buy, you would buy it. If it wasn't, you would buy something else.
I think my last question, this is something I read in that Economic Times article, which really got me thinking. It said that, look, equity returns have truly been incredible for the last many decades now, right, almost. But surely this will moderate over time. And so that's one of the reasons to not perhaps invest in equities. I mean, or I think it was being used to make an argument for UPS versus NPS or something. How do you feel about that? Look, the fact is that double-digit equity returns, surely this is only going to be true for some decades in a country's growth, right, at some level. So if growth is going to moderate, that also means inflation will presumably come down as well. So your real returns may still be fairly respectable. But how do you deal with the fact that you may have a future where stocks aren't doing so incredibly well, costs don't rise as much, but stocks aren't doing so well, debt is also just a little bit better than equity. In other words, do all these numbers still make sense when everything just moderates in the future and we're just a older and less high growth economy?
You know, I think I heard about this as a concept in general from a lot of countries where there has been declining either populations or declining, I mean, not incomes meaningfully, but declining populations and declining GDP overall. Is that, oh, well, if things are going to be so bad, what happens? Look at Japan. The, Japan has been consistently declining in population for a long time. While they had their peak in 1992, it took them for 30 years to recover that peak again. But there was a point of a drop. And from 2005 or 2006 onwards, if you kind of map the territory, they've dropped and then gotten back up. Now, why would a declining economy see a rising stock market? It doesn't make any sense. But maybe there are external reasons for it. But it's also that the average Japanese person is living a far better life than they were 30 years ago. The average Japanese person has talking toilets, which they invented, for whatever reason. They love their toilets. Apparently, there is a whole thing about this thing. But they are able to do this because they're immensely wealthy. Even who loves toilets? Unless, I mean,
they're living in the future in every dimension.
They're living in the future in a lot of ways. So, in that sense, I don't think the quality of life deteriorates. And I don't think that in that sense, equity returns will only consistently go down. It is possible that to meet the fact that people are making more money, people will consume more money. Because if the average person is wealthier, they're not only saving more, they're spending more. If they're spending more, they need things to spend on. We want, in India, we keep talking about, we have maids and this. We don't eventually need them. We're not going to have them because the maids are going to get richer.
And move on to different employment.
And you know what? It's going to be really expensive to hire a maid. So you're going to have to do the work yourself. So you're going to buy those robots. Who's going to make them? I mean, it's not always going to be Japan. Some Indian guy is going to make robots. And that Indian company is going to be listed on the stock exchange. And that stock exchange will therefore reflect it. America was largely petrol into 1998, 2000, Exxon Mobil and all that stuff. Then it moved to Walmart because people are buying stuff. Then it's moved on to Google and Facebook and Instagram because now they're doom scrolling because even the stuff that they buy in Walmart is cheap. So they don't have anything else to do. So they're watching random comments from random strangers on the internet, which we were told to avoid in the past. Now you will take a car ride from a stranger on the internet. So there is, in fact, a change in consumption patterns as we grow older, and that makes someone rich almost all the time. So I'm positive. I can't guarantee this for sure, but I'm positive that even equity markets, like life, will find a way. And therefore, I think betting on the ingenuity of humans is probably still a good thing.
Thanks, Deepak.
It was awesome. It was fun.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.